So you have good talent on your team. Now, how do you keep them? That's what we're here for today on The Leadership Voice. Welcome to The Leadership Voice. I'm your host, Jay Barbuto. Today's show features talent retention and what organizations around the world are doing and need to do in order to keep their best people. Joining us today will be Regina Johnson, Global Head of Human Resources at Western Asset Management Company, and Tom Capizzi, Vice President and Chief Human Resource Officer for CHOC Children's Hospital. We also have a special leadership lesson being delivered by Professor Lorenzo Bizzi. But let's start things off with today's quote of the day. Today's quote comes from Richard Branson. Success in business is all about people, people, people. Whatever industry a company is in, its employees are its biggest competitive advantage. Our first guest today is Regina Johnson. She serves as Global Head of Human Resources at Western Asset Management Company, LLC. As the Global Head of Human Resources, she oversees all aspects of human capital management for the firm. Ms. Johnson joined Western Asset in 2017 and serves as part of the firm's management committee. She brings more than 19 years of experience in global human resources with specific industry expertise in financial services, technology, and data analytics. She also serves on the advisory board for Cal State Fullerton's Mahalo College of Business and Economics, as well as lead with Moxie. Ms. Johnson earned her bachelor's degree from the University of California, Berkeley in psychology and holds a master's degree in organization management from the University of Phoenix. Please welcome to the Leadership Voice, Ms. Regina Johnson.
Thank you so much for having me, Jay.
Regina, it's great to have you on the show. Maybe we could start if you could share a little bit about your career journey and how you eventually came to be in your current role.
Absolutely. So when I think about human resources, it was not my first choice. I landed in financial services and recruiting at Bank of America and during the dot-com phase. And that was a wonderful experience to be able to understand about the business, about talent, and how companies actually work and operate. From there, I've been able to progress in my career as a human resources business partner, helping organizations transform, dealing with really big challenges in terms of growth, mergers and acquisitions, but then also what does it mean around developing and sustaining their talent as it relates to people. I've had the privilege of working not only in financial services at Bank of America, but have worked in technology companies, data and analytics companies, and have really had the opportunity to be able to see what companies need to be able to reinvent themselves, sustain growth, and what it means to be able to lead their people along that journey. And that's really essentially led me to Western Asset. They're going through that same growth journey as well.
Oh, terrific. So how important has talent retention become in today's economy? You've worked at a lot of different companies, and so you've seen firsthand how much it is prioritized. So how important has retention become?
It's critical now. And it's critical because the way in which work is done is completely different. We are a global economy. We have new skills that are emerging, coming in to the economy every year. Skills are changing. And so what that means as we think about people and what it means as we think about talent, it really means that our ability to be able to train, develop, and harness the potential of our people become even more critical in the sustainability of business. These days, an individual can be their own brand. They can work for themselves and have multiple jobs and live a fulfilling life. So that means when they want to be able to work with an organization, they're looking more for not just the day-to-day 9 to 5, can they get the compensation that they're looking for? They're looking to be challenged and they're looking to be able to contribute. And that's different than I think of past decades as it relates to work. So the future of work has really been shifting for quite some time.
Terrific. So many believe that we're already in the war of talent, and that it's going to become even more dramatic as boomers continue to retire from the workplace. Given this, how do you believe organizations need to be positioning themselves now to be ready for what's likely going to be quite a change in the landscape?
That's a great question. And the war on talent has been going on for quite some time. And that's as a result of needed skills, the labor workforce who actually wants to be able to work and who wants to be able to retire. We have 6 different generations now within the workplace, all with different experiences, backgrounds, and needs. And I think the one thing that companies really struggle with is how to best leverage that talent mix. I think before there was a big belief system that only a few set of generations could really kind of contribute to the workforce and that you retire at 50. I think what we're seeing as it relates to entrepreneurs starting companies at the age of 50, all of those age-old stereotypes have been blown out of the water. So how work and how individuals contribute to work is completely different than what it was even 30 years ago. And so what that means as we think about retention is how do we best harness the great talents of our people at their various points in their life stages. And companies who figured that out have had the right talent mix and are able to grow and sustain growth.
Could we talk a little bit about what it means to be a preferred workplace? We hear this term a lot. And companies that want to retain their talent clearly have to think about ways to be a preferred place to work. Could you talk about what that means today?
I don't think there's a silver bullet as it relates to being a preferred workplace. I think organizations that are seen as top places to work for have figured out their company culture. And they've also figured out how to create an inclusive culture that maximizes the skills and the talents of their people. I also think it means that they make investments within their people. And that means training. It means how they think about job assignments, projects, roles. It means that they're not just developing individuals for the jobs they do today, but they're making those investments in the talents for the future. Those traditionally tend to be organizations that have sustainability, that also have good retention numbers because they understand their culture and they create an environment that sustains that and they make the appropriate investments within their employees and talent base to be able to achieve that.
So there's a lot of folks that might be watching this show. Some might be in the talent space. If you were to give advice to somebody who just took on the task of a specialist in talent retention or talent management, what advice would you give somebody who is new to their role and they want to succeed and they want to be great at their job? What advice would you give somebody that is taking on the task or the role in a company of talent retention specialist?
I would say there are several core golden rules. Understand the business, have a passion for the business, and listen to the people. If you do those 3 core things, you will understand the real inner workings around how the business has been successful, where it needs to go, but also where the people who are contributing to the success of the business have those effective needs. Understanding how people contribute to the business, what their needs are in their different life stages, enables us to understand how do we create the best experience within the workplace. And companies that understand on creating the best experience, whether they are onboarding coming into the organization, they're brand new, or whether or not they just received a new promotion, whether or not they're having a major milestone in their life and they're looking at having some flexibility, or they're starting to think about retirement. Those are all different experiences in which a company can create an effective way to meet the needs of the people, but also meet the needs of the business. So I think if you focus on those 3 core things, you'll be very successful.
Okay, that's wonderful. Regina, you've given us some great things to think about and some great advice for our viewers to chew on when it comes to talent retention. Now, you're going to stick around because we're going to have some Q&A, and you'll be back with our other guest to answer some of those questions as well, right?
Yeah, I will.
Terrific. And now it's time for a featured segment of the Leadership Voice. It's today's Did You Know? 2.5 million Americans quit their jobs every month, and the majority of turnover occurs in the first year of employment. This means that if your company wants to cut down on turnover and keep its best people, you'll need to make sure that the onboarding and first-year experience of your employees are good ones. It's now time for today's Leadership Countdown. Today we bring you some tips for improving talent retention. One key to improving retention is to evaluate current tactics like recruiting, employee onboarding, and overall company culture to promote talent retention. We have 5 areas to focus on to improve in this area. Number 1, we have employee recruiting. A bad hire causes turnover. When you're going through the interview process, do you get the sense that a potential candidate is a job hopper? Maybe expectations were misread? Maybe someone hired didn't have the skills needed? Sometimes employee retention is about getting the right people to join your team, and failure to do so becomes a retention issue. Number 2, we have employee onboarding. How you welcome and integrate new employees into the organization goes a long way towards their eventual retention and turnover. Does your company have a good onboarding process? It needs to if you want to keep your best people. The third method for promoting talent retention is employee engagement. Creating the right culture goes a long way to attracting and retaining strong talent. In a study by Towers Perrin, engagement, or lack thereof, can be directly related to turnover. 66% of highly engaged employees reported they had no plans to leave their company, compared to 31% of disengaged employees who are actively looking for new work. Improve engagement and you will reduce employee turnover. Number 4 is employee training. Training is a great way to show that you are invested in your employees. Training can range from career development opportunities to financial wellness programs. By showing that you are invested in your employees' professional and personal lives, you are encouraging loyalty and engagement. And finally, the 5th way to promote retention in the workplace, pay well, or pay differently. It's no secret that many employees look at pay as an indicator of their happiness at work. The moment an employee is unable to pay their bills or live a comfortable lifestyle, they will instantly think to themselves, is this the job for me? But many companies have found ways to be creative to promote employee loyalty. On-site health, on-site dry cleaning, on-site daycare, on-site fitness centers, on-site affordable restaurant. Perhaps there are other services that your employees may find to be of great benefit. Pay can take different forms, and many of these fringe benefits promote employee retention. So there you have it, 5 areas your organization can focus on to improve talent retention. Please stick around, we have Tom Capizzi in the studio, and we'll be right back after this commercial break.
Well, we found here at Honda Center and the Anaheim Ducks that the Center for Leadership brings expertise in doing research, in doing training. The faculty that has come and given the training to our employees does all the research themselves. They're not pulling this information off the shelf. They're out there researching themselves, talking from firsthand experience, and it brings such a level of competency that we, again, don't find from other trainers that are on the market.
Well, simply put, is what really differentiates and distinguishes Fullerton and the Center for Leadership really is your expertise. You guys are able to create customized content for our business based on true research.
The faculty from Cal State Fullerton, obviously they're professors of their field. They have deep knowledge and research, but also aside from the theory, they really bring in some practical examples and they bring in a lot of interactive activities.
The Bringing Learning to Work initiative is our way of meeting the needs of Orange County businesses and communities. When our clients ask the Center for Leadership to come to bring learning to work, the clients know that they're getting cutting-edge information, the latest thinking in the field, but they're also getting world-class training. Welcome back to the Leadership Voice. Our second guest today on the Leadership Voice is Tom Capizzi. Tom is currently the Vice President and Chief Human Resource Officer at CHOC Children's Hospital, the premier children's healthcare provider in Orange County. Tom brings well over 35 years of extensive human resources knowledge and experience in the areas of executive and leadership development, change management, retention, engagement, learning and organizational effectiveness, talent acquisition and talent management. He has held various human resources, leadership positions in companies such as Magellan GPS, PCTEL, Charles Schwab, DJO Incorporated, Genentech, Quantum Computers, McKesson, PepsiCo, and the Hertz Corporation. In addition to serving on the Center for Leadership Board of Advisors, he also serves on the Vista Community Clinic Board in San Diego, the Visionary Executive Network in Orange, and the Children's Hospital Association HR Advisory Board. It is with great pleasure to welcome to the Leadership Voice, Tom Capizzi.
Hey Jay, thanks for having me.
Tom, it's great to have you on the show today. We've been looking forward to you joining us to talk about talent retention. Maybe we could start it with a little bit of a background. Could you tell us a little bit about your career trajectory and how you came into your current role?
Sure. I've been in HR almost 40 years now. I started back in the late 70s when I worked for actually my first New York hospital, my first healthcare organization in New York, and decided that I really started in HR kind of in an interesting way. I studied for the priesthood for the Diocese of New York. I was a paramedic in New York City, and I actually joined NYPD for a little while there, a short period of time, and then got engaged and realized that my wife really wanted me to find another role instead of being a police officer at that point. The mortality rate was pretty high in New York. So she said, hey, with all that background, you should go talk to my dad, who was a CFO, and he led me into labor, and I became a labor negotiator, and ultimately that's how I started HR. And HR kind of led me to the different companies I've been with. I've been able to kind of move my career up over the years, making step by step. HR is very transferable, so moving into different industries allowed me to do HR both domestically and internationally. And a lot of the work I did went into HR internationally for the last 20, 25 years. And then joined CHOC about 4 years ago as they're asked to join, to do some consulting, and then eventually the CEO asked me to join as their Chief Human Resource Officer, and I've been there almost 4 years now.
And you've ended up with quite a variety of organizations in different industries and different types of companies, which has given you a really good perspective of how things may be different in different industries, how different companies operate. So how would you describe the role of the Chief Human Resource Officer as it relates to employee retention?
I think the CHRO really sets the stage, sets the dynamics in terms of understanding the company, understanding the business that they're in, and then realizing what are the retention concerns in those industries. Retention is across the board a need that every industry has, but it varies from industry to industry in terms of what you're looking for, the type of talent you're looking for. So I think the CHRO really sets the stage in terms of the type of talent. How do you find that talent? How do you retain it? And then how do you develop it for the future as well? And I think it's that continuum you have to look at as a CHRO.
So when you think about the competitive environment that we're in and the role of retaining top talent, how has that changed during your career? You've been in human resources for 40 years.
Yeah.
So how has the focus on talent retention shifted?
It's really shifted from making sure you have the right type of business to making sure you have the right type of people for the future. Back in the early stages of HR, you could get away with making sure you had good compensation, solid benefits, perhaps some training, but then ultimately what companies realize is as the companies evolved, as the organizations evolved, as we evolved over the last 4 decades, the needs changed. We went from being a good company to now a socially conscious company, a company that is focused on a mission. Many of our employees now join CHOC as an example because of the mission of CHOC. Many of the companies out there are talking about their mission, their values, their strategic initiatives that they're looking at for the future. How does that company affect the world? How their company affects society? That's what employees are looking for. In the past, they were looking for a good job with a good pay. Now they're looking for a solid pay, a competitive pay, but looking for a good company, a good solid company, and a company that's going to last the length of time that needs to be there. And so it's evolved. It's definitely evolved. And even internationally, it's evolved. Retention is not just a domestic issue. It is a worldwide issue that we're all dealing with.
So if you were to look into your crystal ball, if we had one, what do you see as the future of talent retention? Where do you think companies are going to see themselves really focusing moving forward?
They're going to need to really look at it in multiple ways. I think earlier you had mentioned about the continuum of care, really the continuum of talent care. And it really starts with recruitment. It starts with recruitment. It starts with making sure you're looking for the right types of people, but no longer it's just to fill a job. Unfortunately, that's where retention becomes a problem, when you're just filling positions. You really have to be filling for the future. You got to be thinking about the future talent and start hiring people today for the future of your organization. So understanding the strategic initiatives and strategic vision of the company. It starts there. It's the onboarding you talked a bit about in terms of making sure that they are onboarded correctly, because we're going to lose them early. We lose them early because they get dissatisfied early. People are not staying with organizations anymore like our dads used to stay with their companies. My father stayed with his organization for 45 years. You don't see that anymore. That sense of loyalty has changed. But the loyalty is really more towards the social side of the company. The company understands the needs of the people in their organization. It's going to allow them to retain them faster. And I think that's the difference. It's that continuum, taking into engagement, you go further along, and then ultimately, as you described, what do you do once you've acquired that talent in terms of keeping them? Talent management is really that whole continuum. It's starting from the beginning to the end of talent, and hopefully helping them retire, hoping to help them get a full, rich career long term.
And so if you were to think about the keys for organizations to retaining talent, and you've touched on some of these things, where does it all start?
It starts from day one. It starts from how you hire and look for the right type of people. It's the culture of the company. If you're not using your culture and your values to hire the right type of person, you're going to wind up with a retention problem, because ultimately you've got to be looking for the right type of talent. Once you do that, I can then develop the talent with talent management, succession planning, really start thinking about some of the things we did at CHOC, around CHOC University. We created a university within a university structure to develop our future talent, our current talent, which obviously needs further development, and looking for the future talent. In healthcare is evolving. And the type of healthcare professionals we need to go after is changing dramatically. There's definitely a shortage of healthcare professionals. So I've got to start thinking about how we develop the future. On a lot of this, how do I keep my talent? I redevelop them, I retrain them, I give them better skill sets and help them evolve their jobs, their positions. And that I think is the opportunity that we have going forward.
Yeah, and it sounds like if an organization is already operating in a purposeful environment, they're going to have some advantages.
Absolutely. You've got to be proactive. Retention really there's a reactive retention and a proactive retention. Many companies go to reactive retention, which unfortunately sometimes is too late. I already have another job. I already have picked that phone up. I'm already unhappy with my career track. Being proactive is the way to go. And as an organization, you have to be proactive in this war on talent, which we really are in the middle of a war. I think Regina mentioned earlier the dot-com wars. We were all dealing with the dot-com wars in the early 90s. We are in that stage again. We're in another war again when it comes to talent.
So if you were to advise somebody that just got promoted or appointed into a role of retention specialist or talent retention specialist
Tough job.
at an organization, what would you tell them?
I tell them, hold on tight. It's evolving. It's a tough job. It's going to get exciting because you have to think about it. It's no longer just thinking about one area of retention. You got to be thinking about multiple areas of retention, starting with the type of people you're bringing on board, and then following that continuum all the way through. Are we providing the right type of benefits? Benefits have changed dramatically from the beginning, 40 years ago to now. Are we giving them the type of environment they want to work in? Are we helping understand what their needs are? And as a talent specialist, I think you have to understand your business, but also understand the psyche of the people you're bringing on board. So whether they're multi-generational, the millennials, they're Gen X's, whoever they might be, each one of them have unique needs. And I think the talent specialist needs to understand that going in there and understand that job. It's a great job. It's a very diverse job. I think it's an exciting job to be a part of.
Oh, that's terrific. Well, Tom, I want to thank you for being on the show. We're going to stick around because we have Q&A. We'll have you and Regina back, and we're going to take questions from the audience.
Great, look forward to it.
So we'll be back here in just a moment. It's now time for a feature segment of the Leadership Voice. It's today's leadership example. Today's episode is all about retaining talent in your organization. So with a little help from Fortune.com, we bring you 30 companies that put employees front and center, better so than any others, as we bring you the Human Capital 30. Hear that? You know what that means. It's time for today's leadership lesson. Today's leadership lesson is being delivered by Professor Lorenzo Bizzi. So let's take 3 minutes to learn about the retention of talent.
Hello, I am Lorenzo Bizzi, and today's leadership lesson revolves around a key question for executives. How can I retain my top talents? The easy answer would be give them more resources, pay them more than other companies, give them more benefits, better working hours, or more vacation. If you pay them less than other companies, why should they stay? This is an easy answer and a wrong one as well. If you pay employees more than competitors, the benefits of higher retention will be eroded by higher labor costs. And in the long run, your company will not benefit. The real question is, how do I retain my top talents without having to spend more than other companies, therefore contributing to the reinforcement of my competitive advantage? There are 4 recommendations that answer this question. First, research shows that there is one thing that new generations, especially millennials, value more than compensation: flexibility. The opportunity to adjust working hours and the possibility of working remotely whenever feasible. There's a misconception that if I leave my employees at home every now and then, they will be less attached to the organization and more likely to leave. Evidence shows that this idea is wrong, especially for new generations. Giving employees flexibility will paradoxically make them more attached to the organization and less likely to leave. Second, create a social environment that will generate attachment to your organization. We spend a lot of our time inside organizations, and most of the people we interact with on a daily basis are our colleagues. If work relationships are collaborative and positive, employees will develop social capital inside the organization. The organization will not only be the place in which they work, but also the place in which they have friends. If employees have friends in the organization, they will be happier to work. They will collaborate better, and at the same time, they will perceive highest costs for leaving the organization because they don't want to leave their friends. Create occasions for employees to develop social relationships. Third, don't focus on trying to retain all your employees. That would be cost inefficient. Focus on identifying the best talents of your company and create a leadership development program exclusively targeted at them. Have all employees or managers nominate the best employees and develop a program that will make them learn how to succeed specifically in your organization. After talents have invested to acquire the skills needed to succeed in your organization, they will have lower motivation to leave it for another company in which they don't know whether those skills will be equally applicable and valuable. Fourth, constantly measure engagement of your employees to find out those who are more at risk and target them with specific initiatives to retain them, such as, for example, job enrichment. A major problem of most organizations is the assumption that your best employees are also your most engaged ones, and therefore the ones most likely to stay. Your best talents are also the ones that could more likely to find jobs elsewhere. So it's fundamental to constantly monitor their level of engagement and identify early signs of dissatisfaction before it's too late. By following these 4 recommendations, you'll be able to better retain your top talents and fuel the growth of your organization. I am Lorenzo Bizzi, and this has been your leadership lesson.
Thank you, Professor Bizzi, for that insightful leadership lesson. It's now time for the Leadership Voices Q&A. Viewers, do you need some leadership advice? Well, you've come to the right place. Every show, we take questions from you, our viewers, and answer them right here on the show. Today, we have 4 questions for our guests. Thank you again to our 2 guests, Tom and Regina, for helping us field today's Q&A questions. Our first question is for Tom Capizzi, and it comes from Dave in Yorba Linda, California. Dave asks, do you think that employee demands and expectations are getting out of hand?
Well, you know, it's evolving. I think what's happening is a lot of employees are now beginning to start thinking about other ways of, new benefits, new ways of looking at compensation, expectations of promotability happening within 6 months. Some of that, yes, some of that is getting a little out of hand. But I think as an employer, I think you need to understand that and address it in your culture, address it in your planning in terms of workforce planning. Even address it in your compensation and benefit programs and say, okay, we heard you. Instead of saying no, we said, well, we've heard you, and now let's think about what we can do realistically as an organization, as a company, to address those needs.
All right.
I would agree with what Tom shared. I think when we hear people making the ask, there's usually a broader why behind the ask. And I think the ability to understand what's behind some of the ask helps us as a company and as a firm really start to address more of the needs directly. We won't be able to solve for everything. Employers can't, right? But we can try to create the best environment possible within the culture that has been established and based on the vision and the growth principles. But I would tend to say it's about active dialogue, understanding the why, and trying to address what you think are reasonable root causes.
So collectively then, employees are not getting out of hand then, their requests?
They're getting a little more involved. They're getting a little bit more. We're seeing more. I would say diversity in their needs.
It's an active discussion.
Absolutely.
And that's what I think is really the point, is that these conversations are actually happening now. And that's a good thing, because now you're actually hearing the voices of people, whereas before you may not have. And that you can work with.
I totally agree.
Terrific. So our second question is for Regina Johnson, and it comes from Madeline in Carson City, California. Madeline asks, is the war for talent crossing national borders? Are we going to be competing with other countries for talent? How has internationalism changed the game?
I would tell you it has already been changing the game for quite some time. We have been the beneficiary in many instances of global talent coming to the U.S. over the past several decades. What we are now seeing, though, is some of that talent now making their way back to home country. I think the bigger thing to think about is in the next 20 years, we know that our gross domestic product globally is 40% of it is going to be contributed by emerging markets. That's outside of North America, that's outside of traditional Europe. And so that then means we've got new businesses, we've got new opportunities that are not necessarily always going to be here within the United States. I think the thing for companies as well as people to be thinking about as it relates to this is, what opportunity does that afford all of us? We sometimes always believe that everything has to be here, and that's not necessarily the case. You can have globalization, you can have business growth, and global economies can thrive as a result. And so what I would say is globalization is here, it's here to stay. I think what we need to be thinking about is, how do we engage and how do we actually actively participate in it, knowing that we are one of the leading economies in the entire world. We have a lot to contribute.
There's a lot of concern about out-migration, we'll call it, in terms of losing talent internationally now, not just nationally. As Regina said, we've been looking for talent for the last couple of decades now internationally and been bringing it in. Today, I bring talent in worldwide for doctors as an example. I have to look internationally for the types of doctors, the types of talent in healthcare. But we're losing that talent also because companies are getting smart. The global companies now providing, and the opportunity to go internationally is a kind of an exciting opportunity for the young employee who really wants to kind of go see Paris, go work in London, go work in an area where in the last couple of decades you didn't have the chance. Companies are getting smart now. They're using that as an opportunity, as a benefit to attract some really key talent out of the US to go work in South America, go work for a while in North Africa, and those areas. So we really have to address that as employers. We've got to get smart and make sure that if we're losing talent that way, let's understand why we're losing talent and let's deal with that in terms of addressing that. Companies that don't have international sites really can't do that. What they can do is reinforce what they have here domestically and hold that talent here so there's less of that out-migration happening to the international sites. But it is a global world. There are no borders anymore when it comes to talent or even retention. It's global.
That's terrific. So our third question comes back to Tom Capizzi, and it comes from Lee in Stanton, California. Lee asks, people say millennials are quick to leave a company. How do you think it is perceived when a person has several job changes during the first 5 years of their career? Does this change in light of the competitive marketplace?
I think it does. Unfortunately, I think millennials have gotten a bad rap about, one, leaving too quickly, not being promoted fast enough, and it is happening. They are moving faster. They are actually, if you see someone leaving and on a resume that they've left in the last have gone to 3 or 4 companies in the last 5 to 6 years, in the past, even my past, 25 years ago in HR, I wouldn't even looked at you. I would have said, no, this is a jumper. We're not even going to look at a jumper. We don't look at that anymore. We look at people and we say, okay, what did they do? Why did they make those steps? Did they learn from the companies they were growing from? And did they move on and actually propel their career? So it's become a little bit of the new norm, allowing that movement faster. Back in the old rent-a-car days, it was easy for people to go from Hertz to Avis, back to Hertz, and even to National. It was actually promoted because you learned the industry that way. I think the same thing's happening now in industries now, where as long as we have an open door and you leave on good terms, the beauty of it for me is I know I have an opportunity to bring you back to me. So go to get experience. I may not be able to make you a leader today. Go get some of that experience, but I'm going to leave my door open so you can come back. So yeah, I believe the millennials are speaking about that type of movement, but as an employer, I need to have my door open to bring them back in and embrace them back as a more solid employee by doing that.
I would add to what Tom said in terms of the millennials have gotten a bit of a bad rap for that. They've also created a bit of a catalyst. If you look at other generations, they're taking note around what kind of a work experience am I getting? And so when we think about how we bring talent into the organization, we are looking not necessarily in terms of time, we're looking at in terms of quality. What was that experience that they had for the time that they were there? What were the contributions? And back to Tom's point, what decision-making came into their decision to leave? If there's a good journey and a good story there, those are not going to be impediments. Whereas in years past, that would have been considered a blocker. But I would say millennials have opened up the conversation with other generations to really kind of ask around what is the quality of the experience, what is the quality of the contribution, and does it just mean time and chair? I don't think experience is no longer about time and chair anymore. Right. It is about the contribution and the outcome.
Great.
Thank you both. So our fourth question comes back to Regina Johnson, and it comes from LaSalle in Covina. LaSalle asks, what should companies start doing now if they want to be able to keep their best people? Is it already too late for the most companies that are behind the curve?
I would say it's never too late to be able to turn anything around. So if you're an organization that has potentially not made investments in your folks, maybe you don't understand the needs of your people, you don't necessarily have a vision, start it. Take the action. Just by taking the action in and of itself will be a signal to the people that you want to be able to hear their needs, have a vision of the organization growing forward, and creating that alignment. Because for many people, as it relates to retention, if they can see a road ahead and they know that they want to be able to contribute to that, and they also know that the company wants to be able to invest in its people, you will see retention as it relates to that. So I'm going to be the optimist and say it's never too late. I think it's only too late for companies that choose to kind of bury their heads in the sand.
Yeah, I would agree with Regina. It's not too late. But you've got to take a concerted effort. You've got to, as an employer today, ask the right questions and go ask those questions of your associates, of your employees. Talk to them. Ask them what's going on. Ask them about their experience so far. As you hire people, follow up with a 90-day, hey, how did that onboarding go? Follow up with the recruitment. Did you feel like your recruitment went well? And that's where it leads into that engagement. And engagement, both new employees, especially when you're losing people for the first couple of years, which is the highest point of our turnover, we're obviously missing something. So if you're not asking the questions as an employer, you're not going to be able to fix it. And so I think it's not too late, but you got to start asking those questions now and start preparing your employees today.
So you're saying that the best time to think of these things would have been maybe a few years ago, but the second best time would be
right now.
Right now.
Right now.
And so I want to thank you both for being on the show and helping us answer questions from our audience. We had some great questions today and also some great wisdom and information shared. If you have a question or need advice, send us your questions here to the Leadership Voice by email, leadershipvoice@fullerton.edu, or by Twitter @CSUF_leadership. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today's show. Today we talked about talent retention and learned many tips and strategies that your organizations may embrace to combat the talent exodus that is pervading many organizations, as the war on talent has taken full swing. Thank you to our guests, Regina Johnson and Tom Capizzi, for joining us to shed light on talent retention, and a special thank you to Professor Bizzi for delivering today's leadership lesson. Join us each episode of the Leadership Voice when we bring you more insights into business leadership. I'm Jay Barbuto, and on behalf of the Center for Leadership at Cal State Fullerton, we'll see you next time right here on the Leadership Voice.